Good afternoon, viewers, and welcome to Futsal868 Corner Talks. My name is Geoffrey Rhodes, series host and moderator, and president of the Futsal Association of Trinidad Tobago. Futsal868 Corner Talks is an online meetup series where global sporting professionals share their experiences and perspectives on the fastest growing indoor sport in the world, futsal. Our main objective is to sensitize and educate sports stakeholders on the sport of futsal and other pressing local and global issues. And this being part 2 is a global issue. So we are deviating once again a little bit from what we know. Before and after the UNESCO statements on race in 1950, many have argued whether race is a biological phenomenon or a social construct. The horrendous death of George Floyd and resulting global protests within the last few weeks have reignited the necessary conversation of race, racial inequality, and social justice. Given this backdrop, this, our 13th episode of the Futsal868 Corner Talks, and we can't forget episode 11, will address part 2 of the topic, the role of sport in racial inequality and social justice. In the first leg, we had Mr. Brian Lewis, president of the Trinidad Tobago Olympic Committee, Mr. Ken McCrew, partner at the Sport Against Racism Ireland, Mr. Kambon Jones, former professional football player and captain of the men's national football team, and Mr. Kivo Lewis, comedian and social media influencer. Today, our team lineup to tackle the second leg of this uncomfortable encounter includes Mrs. Sonja Johnson. Sonja currently serves as the chair of the International Chess Federation Planning and Development Commission, where she is responsible for overseeing and coordinating the activities of the PDC. She is also the president of the Trinidad Tobago Chess Association, where she contributed to the improvement of the standards of the operation within the TTCA, while also focusing on inclusivity. Sonja also serves as chair of the arbitration panel of the Trinidad Tobago Olympic Committee. She has volunteered in chess programs for children at risk and held chess tournaments at the maximum security prison and the Carrera prison. Under her leadership, the TTCA was awarded Top Administration Small from the First Citizen Sports Foundation for 2015, 2016, and 2018. And in 2019, they were awarded the Top Sportsman Organization. So we want to say welcome to Sonja. Good day, Sonja.
Good day, Geoffrey. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Well, a woman of your status, I have to make sure I get it right. Up next on the field of the is Mr. Shabaka Kambon, currently executing projects related to climate change and gender equality in the OECS region. Shabaka Kambon is an accomplished communication specialist who has managed major portfolios at the national and regional levels within private and public sector entities, as well as civil society. For us in sports, more so the communications manager at the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs. The holder of a degree in history and a master's in international relations from the University of West Indies, he has a long track record of activism promoting human rights and social justice. In 2017, Shabaka launched his own civil society organization, the Crossroads Freedom Project, confronting the past to free the future. This organization has, as it stated, aimed the revitalization of the Caribbean civilization project started at independence. Its approach, thus far, has been to challenge both the open glorification of colonial violence that persists in our public spaces and lack of representation of the real heroes and heroines of the Caribbean. The organization has already made history with the Rename Milner Hall campaign, which successfully advocated for the name of art imperialist Alfred Milner to be removed from the oldest hall of residence at the University of West Indies St. Augustine campus. In 2018, it was renamed Freedom Hall. I want to say welcome to Mr. Shabaka Kambon. Welcome, sir. Lastly, I think Mr. Kambon has a little bit of issues, but that's okay. He'll be back with us. Lastly, our foreign-based striker, who has many a goalkeepers of social oppression scared, we welcome Councillor Cleo Lake, former Lord Mayor of Bristol, who admitted that office in 2019. She's a social justice activist with a background in arts and culture. In her time as Lord Mayor, Councillor Cleo Lake has brought anti-racism issues to the fore, gaining national media attention for removing portraits of slave trader Edward Galston and Robert Cracks Nugget, a figure who played a key role in expanding the transatlantic slave trade from her office. She was particularly active in regards to the Windrush scandal, a shocking and heartbreaking situation affecting long-standing community elders and others. It was announced 2 days ago that she is set to stand. She's set to stand to be the next deputy leader of the Green Party of England and Wales. Welcome, Councillor Lee, to our show. And thank you for all of you all for joining us on Futsal868 Corner Talks. Are you all hearing me clearly?
Yes.
So let's go straight into it. Councillor Lake, if you're hearing me, can you, I think let me see. Are you hearing me, Councillor Lake?
I can definitely hear you, but for some reason my camera is not working, I'm afraid.
And that's okay. When it is, you can continue to troubleshoot. Once we can be able to hear you.
Yes.
That's fine. So if I may, if we just go straight to Councillor Lake. Well, I will. Are you hearing me again, Councillor Lake?
Yes.
You hear me? Okay. So let's go straight into it and ask you, what is social justice and how does racial inequality fit into that concept?
Sorry, can you say this first part? There's a lot of background noise. I don't know if other people could mute.
Not a problem.
Yeah, good idea.
That's better. Sorry, please could you repeat the question?
Not a problem. What is social justice and how does racial inequality fit into that concept?
Social justice for me is the ability for everyone to thrive and everyone to be happy. I think really when we go around the houses on discussions about this, we kind of forget that actually, certainly for me and my family, my purpose on the earth is also to enjoy my time on the earth and to leave it in a better place than how I inherited it. I think we are all very well aware that for hundreds of years, people of African heritage and others across the globe have not had the ability to enjoy life. By and large, it has been a struggle just to survive. And now I think we really need to see policies in place that mean that we don't just have to survive. We don't just have to put up with things that are meted out to us, but that we can actually go back to thriving and looking after each other and the planet.
If I may throw that question out to Shabaka or Sonja, what's your take on it?
Well, Sonja, you want to go first? All right. Well, what I would do, I think Cleo has really very simply dealt with the question of social justice. I think what I would do is add to the question and to try to define racial justice, which is one of the important struggles under the banner of social justice to make the world essentially a better place. And one of the most problematic forms of struggle underneath that banner, because it's one of those forms of struggle that are not regarded with enough respect either on the right or on the left. And so those who have battled for social justice, or for racial justice, have often found it a very difficult going. And that's why this is a particularly important period for racial justice, because it seems that the whole world has just woken up to what racial justice warriors have been saying for a long time. that white supremacy is a problem, not just for people of color, but for all people on the planet. And my generation, the younger generations across all racial lines, are standing up to try to overthrow that particular form of injustice.
Sonja? You need to on mic. You need to unmute your mic.
That would definitely help. Okay. Yes. Okay. So it's really interesting. I know that this period, it's a very this is a very important period that we have I consider in our lifetime, in my lifetime certainly. And I know there's a lot of conversation, as Shabaka says, related to racial and so on injustice. But I think I want to kind of go back a little bit to the councillor in terms of her definition, in terms of really remembering the whole as well. I mean, when you talk about social as a woman, I think about gender, I think about sexual orientation, about class, there are many different facets that when you speak about social justice that I think that we need to tap on. Of course, racial is in your face. This is what we all face. I mean, looking at the panel, that we will all be naturally exposed to. But I don't want us to forget some of these other kind of satellite kinds of issues that must be brought to bear in the conversations if we're really trying to come up with solutions to address.
And I must say that you're quite correct, because when we look at discrimination, we have to understand that discrimination comes in so many different facets, especially dealing with a multicultural, a diverse society as Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. And it was very important to us to find a group of individuals who can speak to that and really address it. With that being said, we just want to touch quickly back to the aspect of racial inequality. Not taken away from your point at all, Sonja, because we're going to definitely
no problem.
But it's also interesting because during the tenure of Councillor, she would have removed certain portraits of certain individuals, as we mentioned in our introduction. With that being said, we have two clips which address one of the statues of one of the gentlemen that she removed. Take a quick look. That was Edward Galston, who at the beginning of her tenure as Lord Mayor, Councillor Cleo Lake would have removed his portrait from the office. Shabaka, you are making attempts to do something similar in Trinidad and Tobago to your project. Can you tell us when it is you saw something like that happen in the UK? How that made you feel? How did your project and the members of your project feel towards seeing something like that?
Well, of course, I don't even want to pretend we were overjoyed, particularly for Cleo. Cleo was also the leader of the countering Colston movement in Britain, and like the Crossroads Freedom Project, she started her work long before this latest global revolt. And, so in a sense, she was a visionary. She understood that the direction that our generation wanted to take the world in terms of social justice, it just didn't have a space. The place that we were going didn't have a space to honor, racist, vile people who committed crimes against humanity. We didn't have a space to honor those kinds of people. I think people like us, we saw it before it happened. and we were working towards it. So I know that that was a great sense of joy for Cleo, along with the fact that Colson's name was removed from one of the old great halls of music in Bristol as well, where the Beatles used to perform, along with the fact that I think she moved his portrait from the office of the Lord Mayor when she walked in there. I think she put a Rastaman up, actually. which would have, I don't know how that went down. I'm sure she'll rejoin us in a minute. So we were very, very happy, as we have been for our brothers and sisters in South Africa when they moved Cecil Rhodes, for our brothers and sisters in New Orleans when they moved the Confederate monuments there, and all across the United States of America and Europe, in Germany, where our brothers and sisters in the Berlin post-colonial movement were able to get that great victory last year, where they got the city of Berlin to stop honoring the main protagonists of colonialism in Africa, in a place called the African Quarter. So it's just a period of unparalleled celebration. I mean, every day in my house we wake up, another monument to some kind of villain of history. Another one of history's villains is on the ground, and we start the celebration all over again.
Shabaka, if I may, how do you think that we Trinidad totally understand what it means by removing these artifacts of history? One, and two, is that similar to what's happening in the United States, where there is the burning of buildings? Do you see any similarity between them?
Where there's the what?
Do you see any similarity between the both in terms of removing the artifacts of history,
right,
and what is happening in the United States of America as regards to the burning of buildings and the in terms of the protesting, duly protesting?
Well, what we're doing has really nothing to do with burning of buildings. But let me just say that what we are witnessing here is a global revolt against white supremacy, against social justice in general, but racial injustice in particular, as was highlighted in the death of George Floyd. And in the context of that, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that the protesters, the people who joined this movement, who took to the streets, from whatever race, Chinese, African, Indigenous American, European, that they turned their attention very quickly to the closest racist in their neighborhood on a plinth. The what we call heroic statuary of the people whose values they were trying to overthrow in their society. I don't think that was accidental at all. And of course, to answer the second part of your question, I'm very proud of what we've been able to accomplish in Trinidad. I think over the last couple months, people in every sector of society, I'm so sure Sonja would testify to this, have been discussing their history. They've been analyzing their history. They've been confronting the past. And we've always said that if we want to free the future, we have to confront the past. And I'm sure that this will bear fruit in major changes in our town because of how our city in particular is constituted, the who and the what that we celebrate in Port of Spain.
So for those who join us, we had 3 guests advertised. At the moment, we have former Lord Mayor Cleo Lake having some technical difficulties, but she'll be back with us very soon. So I just want to shift gears quickly to recognize a female sport administrator who's making history on her own. She's doing a remarkable job in that, Sonja. And Sonja, given our discussion of social justice, noting gender inequality being one that is bantered in sports, Caribbean sports, global sports, can you give me your experience to date as regards to gender inequality, your experience?
Okay, that's a very and in my way, maybe a little bit of a loaded question, but I'll take it as I see it, right? Because it has so many things that come to mind. Yes. But because you have it as, and I'll use the different hats, right? Because as you said, I'm an administrator. And for me, I'll talk as an administrator maybe first. And not just an administrator in a field that is predominantly male. So I will speak to that, and which is the sport of chess, where globally, when you look at numbers, it's at least in terms of participation, it's at least 80-20, if not more, weighted towards the male. And even in administration, it's even less. It's less than 10% female participation in administration. I have to say that my journey as an administrator in chess was really generally, I think, a pretty fair one, a pretty good one in terms of when I look at my timeline to become where I am today, where I started initially in 20, just like a chess mom, like anybody else who had children in the sport. And after that, showing maybe interest in different ways, how you could assist, showing a skill set, how it could be used to help the administration, and then formally coming on as an administrator in public relations in 2013 for 2 years, and then served as vice president in 2015 and subsequently president from the end of 2015 to date. So I think when I look at the chronology of my activity as an administrator, I think it was a pretty good one. And I think a lot of it had to do with the level of support that I received. And particularly, I want to say from men actually within the chess world, because I think if I didn't have that level of support from men, I may not have reached where I am today because of it being male dominated. So, a lot of what, a lot of the experiences and your colleagues and so on would be male. But again, it's those males who were able to see what I had to offer was able to allow me the opportunity to reach where I am today. So that's just a little snapshot on that administrator hat.
Given from many studies, racial profiling in Caribbean sports is alive and well. We grew up hearing that Indians are for cricket and Negroes are for football. I mean, we addressed this in 2 episodes before with TTCA president and Mr. Brian Lewis, as well as Mr. Kambon Jones, former Soca Warrior captain, national team captain. To both of you all, Sonja first, and then to you, Shabaka, and especially Shabaka, in the sense of your communications at the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs at one stage. What would you all advise sport administrators to do as regards to deal with such?
I think, and that's a very good question. I think you heard one of the things when you were reading out my profile, one of the focus areas was inclusivity. That is deliberate. I think as a sporting organization, even if you look at our strategic plan and some of the focus points and areas and so on, one of the values is linked to that. Because, I mean, especially where we come from in Trinidad and Tobago, to me, I see we have no excuse. We are blessed with diversity in this country. And we've seen time and time again how that diversity has allowed us to achieve immense things, enormous things, amazing things in this country. And I would speak for chess in particular. I think what we've seen is that, especially at the young levels,
okay, right.
the levels of the kids. Tobacco?
Go ahead.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So I think that for us, I mean, I know it's important and people make the distinction, but that has not been in my view, that has not been our reality now. I think in the past, when we did some of the history, you see, we did a history of chess in Trinidad and Tobago. There was definitely that distinction of who played chess. People still now, I mean, I talk to my good friends and they say, well, Sonja, chess is for, the elite and people who know, the bright people. So there's that stigma still. But when you look at on the ground, if you come to our tournaments on the ground, you would see the diversity, and particularly our majority populations, which is of African and Indian descent. So it's almost evenly keeled. So, I mean, that is not really a problem that we have now. But I think what we need to do is to ensure that good model is sustained. Because, you know, as you get older, you get exposed to other kinds of influences, which may then impact impressions and how you do what you do. So I think as administrators, we need to make sure we have certain kinds of policy statements and certain infrastructures, institutional frameworks to help preserve what are those core values, especially as it relates to inclusivity and accepting diversity and so on within our institutions.
Thank you very much, Sonja. So I had the show all planned nicely, and you know, Councillor Lake, you were supposed to come at this stage and that stage, and, you know, it was all nice, you know, but things happen, and as they always say in sports, the show must go on. So if I may, to my two panelists, I just want to go back a little bit in our script and address Councillor Lake. I'm going to put up a picture here, and this picture was the day the portrait of Edward Colston was removed from City Hall office in Bristol. And the second person, not the only female, but the second person from the right is Councillor Cleo Lake. Councillor, to you, while you were there and you were seeing that portrait being removed, what was your emotions? What were your emotions? What were you feeling?
It was really hard to put into words, but it was a huge sense of relief. It was very empowering. And it just filled me with a sense of whatever people put their mind to, they can achieve. And that people should not be afraid to challenge when they know something is wrong, and not to allow convention to run and continue to run how things are done, because a lot of things don't happen and go unchallenged simply because of convention. Things have always been that way, so why are they going to change? Well, they change because people tell them it's time to change and stand up and take action.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because we did a lot of research on all three of you all. And if I may, as you speak about taking action, back at you, Councillor Cleo, this is what we got. This is what we came up with. This was a quote from you that we were very much impressed with, that we just had to show. And with this being said, can you explain a little more to our viewers, to your fellow panelists, as regards to what brought about that quote?
Well, in a very practical way, that quote came about because I was running to be an MEP, a member of the European Parliament, of course, when the UK was still in the That was something that I wanted people to relate to, understand what I was standing for in terms of trying to run for that position. So again, it was about social justice. It is about inclusivity. And I think what we've had, certainly in the UK, when I think of the African heritage community and others, it's felt very much like we've continued to be on the margins and that we haven't mattered. We have a small window now where perhaps on paper we might matter, but it hasn't been the narrative. So I wanted to give people who are disenfranchised from the system a sense of hope and a sense that I am from where you're from, and I'm not joining mainstream politics to continue to uphold the status quo.
You said that there's a small window. Can you elaborate why you say that?
Because of the global movement now, the global Black Lives Matter movement, which, you know, has raised awareness, but it shouldn't be understood that it exists in a vacuum. I think it's incredibly important that people further educate themselves and understand the grassroots movements and the foundation movements that have also underpinned the call for radical equality, and that we understand underlying issues such as Afrophobia, which should be a word that everyone is now familiar with because it's been a reality for generations and generations.
It's interesting that you mentioned Afrophobia. Last 2 episodes, this is part 2. We looked at vocabulary. We looked at vocabulary such as blacklist. Shabaka, you know that especially in sports, you hear.
I'm hearing Cleo quite well. Jeffrey, are you there?
I'm here.
Cleo, well, there's this moment of silence. Let me just say congratulations to you and the Bristol.
Are you hearing me, Shabaka? Shabaka, are you hearing me? Are you
hearing me? Muted.
Okay. Are you hearing me, Cleo?
I could hear you, yeah.
Right. Shabaka, are you hearing me by chance? I don't think Shabaka is hearing me. All right, but as we said, the show must go on. But there's a very interesting point that you made, Cleo, and I must say thank you very much for that, because that goes into something that from our research, sports protests pertaining to and for social justice goes deep and far. Before we give this brief history lesson, it's important to understand that these protests hinge on race, gender, money, and nationality, with all having a common theme, the constant struggle for justice. But even when our team compiled this video that we are going to show in a bit, it was very interesting because it shows that our struggle.
Okay, Jeff, you're going to have to repeat the question, my friend. I'm hearing you now.
Are you hearing me now?
But you're going to have to repeat the question.
All right, well, I'll come back to you because we're now going to show a video as regards to what our council was mentioning. It's because of the short window.
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Right. We're speaking about the short window because we as well, from our research, recognize that it may really truly be a short window because our struggle, especially in the realm of sport, has been going on for a while. And let's just take a quick look as regards to what it is our research team came up with. So let's take a quick look. So Shabaka, are you hearing me? Are you hearing me clearly now? Shabaka? Sonja, are you hearing me?
Yes, I am, clearly.
Are you hearing me? Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go with Councillor. Shabaka, you hear me, Shabaka?
Yes, I'm hearing you, Jeffrey.
Great. So as that video showed, and it's very interesting what Councillor Cleo said in terms of the short window, because we recognize from since 1936 and now we have been fighting social justice. And I'm very much concerned as regards to the utilizing of our effort as a people. Does that video highlight what it is you mentioned before, Councillor Lake? As regards to noting the short period that we have.
Is that a question to me?
Yes, it is.
Shabaka, could you mute? Because I think there's a lot of interference coming through on the sound.
Right.
Great, thank you. Well, what you've just shown us highlighted that within to be heard and for our words to be actioned has been intergenerational and has gone by and been ignored largely. Any gains that we've had historically and to the present day are because we've taken them and that we haven't just tried to wait for a system that was never designed for us to action. I think when I talk about the window that we have now, I do feel that we're at a unique juncture where a lot of the world has woken up and has finally found empathy and understanding in our journey. And they also realize that we're at a pivotal moment. We're actually, talking to some of my elders who happen to be Rastafarian, but have been on the liberation road for decades. They say now it's simply not just about race. It's simply, are you for justice or injustice?
Shabaka, can you expand on that point? Do you agree? And I would like you to speak more to the Trinidad and Tobago context as well as the Caribbean context.
Right. So race has always been a great mirror for the world's attitude towards race. Sport has often been a great mirror, a barometer for a country's attitude towards race. And as I was looking at the images you had up on the screen there from the United States of America, my mind actually drifted to Trinidad and Tobago and the fact that we have a similar history here. We pass through the similar things here, but we don't know our history. And so, for example, in the early 20th century, in the high point of pseudo-scientific racism, it was believed that Africans couldn't play cricket. And so cricket in this country was dominated by Europeans. And then at first they started to allow Africans to field and to bowl. It was believed that we didn't have the mental fortitude to bat. So batting was reserved for whites in Trinidad. And it was not until a team from Belmont and Laventille started to beat the Queen's Park Cricket Club that eventually they agreed that blacks could bat in this country. And so, and all those things are there for the record. You could go back and see the names of these men, these pioneers and so on, who broke those barriers here in Trinidad. So while we're talking about Jesse Owens and others like that in the United States of America, we have to try to understand what was happening right here in Trinidad. And similar stories apparent in gymnastics, in swimming, in golf, right here in Trinidad. That story of because we live in a global environment. We have done so for a long time. In fact, the Caribbean has been at the center of globalizing since in the last 500 years. And as a consequence, we have this view that somehow we're sort of separated from what's happening internationally, but that is just not the case.
Is society choosing the harder right or the easier?
I think I've lost everybody. Let's see.
Sonja, are you hearing me? Okay. And Councillor Cleo, are you hearing me?
I am. Can you hear me?
Okay. Is society choosing the harder right or the easier wrong in dealing with racial inequality and social justice? Sonja, I will ask you to answer, please, first.
I think, Geoffrey, quite frankly, I think we have really not addressed this issue of racial inequality in any real way, particularly I find in Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, and to me, it's kind of a welcome discussion because we don't like things that are hard in this country. We don't like to have hard and difficult conversations. And I think that what has happened in the US and on all the global outrage that we've been seeing has forced us to look within ourselves. Because all this thing that we keep on saying, of this being a plural society and all that kind of thing, when we really look behind the scenes, we see a lot of it, there was quite a bit of window dressing and a lot of things that were already there, but we never wanted to bring to the fore. And only when we started to have conversations with our friends and our peers, that's when we realized what some of the underlying issues were there for so long. So, I mean, I am not the one to say whether it was right or wrong, but what I do say is that there's no time better than now for these discussions to be held. It's no better time than now for us to understand where each of us sit on each of these very important issues, and particularly the issue of race, whether it's been our personal experience or not. It's important for us to have these discussions. It's important for me to have these discussions with my children, where I have from teenager down to young, who are not accustomed, who've gone to schools, maybe they might say some of the best schools in the country, and may not have been exposed to some of these things in a real way. But it's important at least to initiate the discussion. I'm not going to judge on people's positions, but I think the real value is having the discussion.
And that is well said, because from research done by the Inter-American Development Agency, it was found that out of the Americas, the Caribbean region has the most reported cases as regards to racial inequality. And that was overwhelming to read. Shabaka, I go back to you with that point. Where are we going wrong? What are we not doing as regards to having these discussions, following Sonja's point? Shabaka? Shabaka, I think it's frozen.
Shabaka?
Shabaka, are you there? Shabaka, are you there? Councillor Cleo, are you hearing me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your patience, Councillor. And because I know you do a lot of work, or you have a great relation with the Caribbean region. Based on my statement just now, based on the research done by the Inter-American Development Agency, can you comment on said, please?
Yes, it's very concerning. It's very concerning that we still find in 2020 that the element of, welfare, to be fair, is still absent by and large. I can reflect on my life here in the UK and understand, especially through this period of COVID-19, that there is a safety net where there isn't always such a safety net abroad in the Caribbean or even in West Africa, for example. I think what we also could reflect on is people's attitude and education. I mean, for example, I know when I was invited over to Trinidad in 2017 and talking further with Shabaka and others, it's quite clear that the education system holds up this kind of Eurocentric narrative by and large, where the system has not fostered a sense of critical thinking amongst our people. And so the menticide and mental slavery is still very prevalent, which means it's challenging for people to think outside of the box at times. Whilst they know they are not happy with their lot in life, they haven't been empowered necessarily to believe that they can change it. And I think, as well, when we look at health inequality, it's shocking to know that countries such as Barbados have a very, very high proportion of people with diabetes and amputees. They are almost an amputee capital. And we can trace that back to the legacy of enslavement and plantation work and dire extreme poverty, where people may have been sent to school with a pound of sugar for their diet. And I don't think we've moved on anywhere near as far enough. I think we're all under the yoke of capitalism, which is promoting, one thing with all this Black Lives Matter and, of course, supporting Black businesses and all of those things that are important. But surely it can't be about replicating the system that has oppressed so many of us. It can't be about Black capitalism.
Yes. Let me just add to that point now and bring us home. Cleo talked about the things that I showed her when she was here in Trinidad. And I'm going to share with you one of the things specifically related to the cross-section now between race and monuments. I took her to the Lopino estate, and we should all be ashamed of what Councillor Cleo saw there, because this is the place where we take our children on field trips in the hundreds every year to learn about or to touch or to come close to the institution of slavery. And when you go to that estate, not only are there no remnants whatsoever of the savagery of this crime against humanity, but the sign at the estate invites you to pay homage to the slave master and his wife, describing them as illustrious and describing the people they worked savage until death as loyal slaves, right? This is how we learn about our past. And what that does, that was designed during the colonial period, as a process of conditioning to make us grateful for colonialism, to make us grateful for genocide and slavery, the civilizing mission, and also to make us understand a hierarchy of white over brown over black. And until we start to address those things that are very real in our public space, in our education curriculum, we aren't serious as an independent people at all.
That leads us to a question from one of our viewers. Mr. Richard Goddard said, remarked and also questioned, I've never heard that story about cricket. How significant is racism and discrimination played in shaping the culture of a nation and our perception of past colonial powers, Spain, England, France, Portugal?
Is this a question for me?
It's a question for you.
Geoffrey?
Yes.
Am I missing something?
Sonja, you could go ahead first, Sonja, if you may. Your mic, Sonja.
Okay, so yes, there is a question here for me. It says, how significant is racism and discrimination in shaping the culture of our nation and our perception of past colonial powers? Well, it's absolutely critical, racism and discrimination in Trinidad. And
Shabaka, are you hearing us?
Yeah, okay, so if I can take a quick stab at it.
Go ahead, we're hearing you. One Shabaka, we're hearing you.
Okay, let me try to take an answer of the question there. But Sonja, you're gonna have to unmute after when you're ready to speak. We have a very casual relationship with colonial violence in this country, and our history. And this is why you've never heard the story about cricket. And much of the stories about our past is really concealed from us in Trinidad. And I'm just going to give you one example. So everybody knows about Woodford Square, right? But nobody really knows about Woodford. Yes, I'm now hearing you, Jeffrey. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you. Yes.
Wow, we're having some difficulties. So I'm going to try again. Okay, just quickly to point out, the way we remember our past really affects, it really, the way we learn about our past shackles our present and undermines our future progress. And I'll give you the example of Governor Woodford in town, right? Governor Woodford was the most legendary racist in Trinidad's history, okay? He was so racist that he didn't think that anybody with a drop of black blood should even be buried next to a white person. If you had one drop of black blood, he had to segregate even the cemeteries. And he was really famous for segregating the churches in Trinidad and Tobago. And so it's ironic that he would have a life-size monument in the cathedral, the Anglican Cathedral, and another monument honoring him in the Catholic Cathedral downtown. But here's the problem with honoring Woodford with that square. There was a Trinidadian by the name of Francis de Ridder who fought Woodford tooth and nail, and Woodford persecuted him until death. He died at 33 years old, trying to fight the regime of segregation and racism that Woodford had set up in this country. He was a Catholic priest, the first Catholic priest of color, and he opened the first Catholic church and Catholic school where you could go, where there was equality in the pews and in the chairs, where everybody was allowed to come in and learn, and everybody was allowed to sit next to each other in the pews. His church was actually where Rosary Boys and Rosary Church is today. And we have forgotten him. We've erased him, somebody who fought for the freedoms we enjoy today from our history, to honor the man who he fought against, who fought to segregate the churches, segregate the schools, and segregate the cemeteries. This is how we're taught our history. And therefore, we will continue to live under white supremacy unless we can change that narrative and get to the truth and rescue our heroes from the dustbin of history.
Thank you very much, Shabaka.
When I say heroes, I mean real heroes, not false heroes.
Of course. Thank you very much, Shabaka. To Sonja, and then to the same question to Councillor Cleo, to Councillor Lake. How can sports assist with dealing with racial inequality and social justice? At the end of the day, this is a sports program, and we really want to be able to find the link between using sport. Is sport part of the problem, or is sport a solution to dealing with racial inequality and social justice? So I'll start with Sonja first, and then on to Councillor Lake.
Again, Jeffrey, you have this wonderful knack of asking some involved questions. I don't know if this is how I'm receiving it, but I think it's very good, because then it has you thinking in a particular way. And why I said that is that there are many other, when you think about in history and so on, certain cultural influences, social and other things that influence sport and how we are today. So I'm not going to focus on that part, because I like moving forward. What could we do to move forward? So I am going from the view that sport could be a solution. We've seen since 1936, in the video that you just showed, you know, the presentation that you just showed, where people use the platform of sport to highlight, you know, these injustices and so on in society. And in some cases, you saw, even though we're still fighting, there's still a fight to be had, but you saw where there was some marginal, there was some incremental changes, and in some cases, some big changes. So as I see it, I see sport as one of the best platforms to be used to help drive this change. But when we say that, we have to then go into a little bit deeper. How could sport perhaps do some of this? So you have at the individual level, so you have our sporting heroes, and I'm going to show something, Shabaka, our true sporting heroes, right? That could use their own. So instead of just focusing on your own sphere, so I'm just a football player, don't tell me what's going on in my community. Don't tell me what's going on in the school where I live next to, where they could expand their scope and try to understand the community within which they operate, their society. And if there's injustice or perceived or otherwise at any level, I mean, of course, the primary in this case, because it's global, it's a global issue, is racial, but almost any injustice. How could you then use what I bring as a hero, my platform, to try and change this? Don't be silent. I think where a lot of us have made mistakes is that we've been silent. Many of us have this influence that people are looking up to. We're not pretending to know everything, but understand that what you say could matter in making a change or or starting the ball rolling. You may be able to speak to someone in the government. You may be able to speak to someone at the level of a mayor to change things, starting with your community. You know, so I see sport as just one of a tremendous vehicle, and those who have that influence, those who really excel, to use it as a platform to really effect the change we need now that will take us into the future.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Lake, can you chime in on that as well, please? Can you add your 2 cents, as we say in the Caribbean?
Definitely. I think if we take the example of football, definitely here in the UK, and it's no different across Europe and wider, we have for decades had the campaign Stamp Racism Out of Football, with in many ways very little wins. What we have now is we're seeing, you know, football teams, they are coming back out to play after obviously putting it on a back burner because of COVID, and you're seeing teams take a knee and have Black Lives Matter written across their backs, but it feels so tokenistic and reactionary. And I'm wondering what substance there actually is to that. While it might be a nice to do, what does it actually do? Because are we seeing many more, you know, Black or African heritage or other diverse candidates who manage football teams? Are we seeing them given senior positions within the industry? No, we're not. That isn't changing. Will it change? I don't know. I think footballers have always had a lot of influence, whether it's, you know, for our young people to aspire to, and we can question that as well in terms of why are they aspiring to that? Is it just the material aspect? Yes, usually it is. But what I would like to highlight is that in the UK, we've had austerity for about a decade, which has crippled communities. We've seen community centres close. We've seen youth services collapse virtually. And we've seen things like, you know, for another example, our public toilets are closed. Our libraries were in danger of being closed down. So people listening in Trinidad and other places, please know that in the UK, it's not this civilized beacon of development and progress. We have issues. We have the haves and the haves not. We do not have equality. But listen to this. What happened about a week or so ago was that because of the lockdown, schools are shut by and large. And of course, there is going to be a lot of inequalities there because not everyone is able to homeschool. Not everybody has access to a computer even to get online to do the homeschool. And furthermore, children are going hungry in the UK. People are relying on food banks. Nurses, essential frontline workers are relying on food banks to survive because the cost of rent, the cost of bills, the wages do not cover it. Children are going hungry. They usually have free school meals. There has been many people lobbying the government to say, look, of course, education is going to have to extend over the summer period. Please continue to give money to poorer members of our society so that they can continue to feed their children. The Prime Minister was not having it. He wasn't listening to these calls. It was only when footballer Marcus Rashford intervened and used his position as a Man U footballer that the government did a U-turn. So that is seeing how actually that young man has made a significant difference using his platform in a way that has changed and added to and helped social justice.
Yes, I think I see that, Cleo, and I want to salute Marcus Rashford. And I want to acknowledge the point that Sonja made initially, and to go one step further and to say that sport is the most popular form of entertainment. It's above movies, video games, etc. So certainly it's a major potential platform for confronting issues of social justice. The problem is that those who profit from sport do not want the athletes to use that platform in that way. And the whole system is really set up to keep athletes silent. Right here in the Caribbean, our athletes who may want to speak out have to be concerned about their where they get their sponsorship from. You know, we do not, from my own experience working in the Ministry of Sport, we don't generally have enough funds available for our athletes to be able to do the things that they're doing. And so they have to seek corporate sponsorship. And of course, again, when they seek corporate sponsorship, they find themselves in a situation where there's certain athletes who are able to get more corporate sponsorship than others because of the communities that they come from. And then the others have to be very careful about what they may represent if they have to get any of that corporate funding at all. And so these are some of the challenges that athletes face who want to speak out.
So we have one final question. Thank you very much, Shabaka. We have one final question to all our panelists, and then we have closing remarks. To Sonja, I know that you do a lot of work in the maximum security prisons and other prisons in Trinidad and Tobago through your national government body for chess. Can you tell us how important is open spaces in sports to have any discussions of racial inequality and social justice? So that question is to all our panelists. So we go first to Sonja, then to Councillor Lake, and finish off with Mr. Kambon.
Yeah, and thank you very much for that, Jeffrey. I mean, the work in the prisons, as I tell people, is one of the dearest aspects of what I do. And what I've found is that when I go into the prisons, I mean, and this is a female walking into maximum security prison, where, by the way, I do feel fairly safe. Generally, they know me as a chess lady, so I know that they've already. But I realize that in speaking with the inmates, you realize that they place a lot of emphasis. Sport has done the people in the programs and so on in the prisons, of which sport is a major part, has really impacted the inmates in a profound way. I've had discussions with many people who are on 30 years, 40 years in remand for 15 years, and they echo the same sentiment that, you know, what sport has done for them. I mean, when they look at how they was as a youth, many times they committed these crimes as a youth, and so on. And they made mistakes, just like you and Shabaka and I and Councillor Lake made mistakes. I grew up in Belmont. There were mistakes we made, but we did not have the supporting infrastructure to help protect us from some of those consequences, you know, so that's why they ended up. And what you've seen that sport has done, it has allowed them to come up with their own kind of internal justice kind of system in terms of how they operate. They come up with their own rules, how they deal with grievances. It's really wonderful to see. But apart from all of that, you see how it has made them grow and help them understand how they could make different kinds of decisions now. You know, and I say that all the time, that it allows them to give the, so when you empower them with these additional skill sets, I would say for chess, everything in chess is a decision, every move. So you're building that skill set within them. There's also the concept of consequence. So hopefully they understand. So even within their fraternity where they are for however long, they could then try and adjust and adapt their behaviors to be maybe more productive citizens. Because I think that is where we have to stop about just looking at elite. Let's see how we could improve the level of the citizen, you know, at the level of the citizen. What could we do for our people? And for example, people tell me, Sonja, why are you making the prisoners smart? You know, these are comments people have made to me, and I feel like almost insulted. I'm like, okay, so is it that they're no longer citizen? Is it that they will never come out? Is it that they couldn't make a mistake? What about their children? What about the next generation? I mean, there's so many things that sport could help doing, and that I have seen has made a difference. So I think So for me, that was my platform. The prison was is one of these kinds of public kinds of spaces and engagements that I thought that we could use to have some of these discussions, even though, I mean, I know I didn't speak specifically to the race, but of course, even within there, they have their own racial rules, you know, the gangster and the Latinos and the European, they have their own, you know, governance, for want of a better word, you know. But again, sport helps to bring many, they see the common values that sport brings and the commonality in ideas and approaches to what they have in common and interests for the common good of the wider group than just looking at the differences. So that has been my experience.
From a personal standpoint, Sonja, I want to say thank you very much for your work as regards to chess, because my nephew, 7 years of age, has taken up the sport and it calms him. It calms him. He is much more focused in school. He's much more attentive to family life. And I want to say thank you very much for what you are doing as regards to your national governing body. And we'll be back with your closing thoughts. But moving on to Councillor Lake. Can you answer the same question, please, ma'am?
Yeah, sure. And I'm really encouraged to hear about the work you're doing as well, Sonja. It sounds really quite pioneering and important. And I think, you know, just to come off the back of that, rehabilitation and reform of the prison system is so needed. And I've had the disappointing news today that, in fact, the UK government has decided they're going to spend 2.5 billion to actually build more prisons so they can incarcerate 10,000 more people. I mean, that is just really disappointing on so many levels. But back to the question about the safe space in sports discussion for, you know, racial inequality and social justice. It is going to take people at the top to not just use the hashtag and the lip service, but to be very bold now going forward and do what is right, which for them may not be popular. As I said, the football season has opened now after a delay. And in one of the first games, somebody flew an aeroplane across with the banner White Lives Matter. So you can also see that it still may not be a safe space, but these are conversations that simply have to take place. And there has to be action. There has to be a code of conduct. There has to be rules. And if they're breached and they're not actioned, the consequences are important. It can't be an option. It has to be a must. I can't hear you, Jeffrey.
Councillor Lake and sport have always been said that clubs need to be punished. Some persons, there has always been debate as regards to what type of punishment that needs to be had in order for clubs and their fans to get the point. Can you give suggestions of how you think that clubs and fans can get the point? What needs to be, what advice would you give to UEFA? What advice would you give to CONCACAF? What advice would you give to FIFA and any other international federation as regards to how they can be able to chastise and still get the point over to the administrators, to the fans as regards to what you're doing are wrong?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we have seen over the years football supporters getting banned and sanctioned, etc., etc. This hasn't led to much change. And I'm guessing that some of this is because the values, although they may be written on paper, they're not embedded. They're not embedded from the top of the institution, and these are not filtering down. So I think it's going to be a challenge. And again, it comes back to education, because, you know, I've seen footage on YouTube of children as young as 5 being with parents who are doing these chants and this football kind of hooligan vibe. And it's, what chance do those children have of actually having an open mind when they're subjected to such violent rhetoric? So it is about how we can challenge these things in the classroom. And again, it's about having an embedded culture that actually is actioning on this and understands why it is happening. It isn't just good enough. Whilst representation is very important, it isn't just good enough. Ushering in one black person on a board, that isn't enough. And that's all that's been done over the years.
To Shabaka?
Well, theoretically, sport has been a place where people from different groups could come together, and coming together and learning about each other has always been something that has the potential to bridge certain gaps, to break down ignorance, and to lead to a more understanding and potentially more solidarity across races. And by the way, when we use these terms, we have to acknowledge that they come from the imagination, the late 18th century, late 19th century imagination of one or two Europeans. These ideas that you have different races and so on, and that that's a biological fact. And that now they've become cemented as a sociological fact. So there's no biological difference between one race and another, but certainly there is racial discrimination based on the idea of race. That is very, very real in everyone's life. And so what I would want to say, I think echoing Cleo's point, is that sport for me would be more of a mirror of the society that we're living in. It does have the potential to impact the society, but we have a responsibility, including the athletes, to transform our society, and we will see those transformations taking place in sport as we do the necessary work. And of course, right now, that work is having a serious boost from the global revolt against white supremacy, which is really transforming everything around us. Just today, before I came on this call, the Governor General of Jamaica suspended the wearing of the official chain for his office because it has on it a picture of Saint Michael, I think it is, or Saint George, with an angel, a white angel with wings, stepping on the neck of a black man who's supposed to represent Satan or the devil. And so, everything around us is white supremacy is embedded, and we all have to fight all those things. And we will see, as throughout history, sport will begin to reflect the changes that we make in the wider society.
So before we continue, we just want to just acknowledge a point from one of our viewers stating that correctly stated, Councillor, even when the heads are held accountable, the fundamental knowledge of history to the individual, not just sportsmen, but generally needs to be learned and remove ignorance. So I want to say thank you very much to those who are viewing us on Facebook as well as YouTube, our YouTube channel. So just closing remarks, starting with Councillor Lake. Please do share your closing remarks.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show tonight. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I'm very happy to be, speaking to an international audience. I think it's really important that we do link internationally and understand just how many there are of us. In the UK, we're reduced to being labelled as BAME, Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic, and we refuse that term because it doesn't sum up who we are. There's always been resistance, there's always been greatness amongst us, and there will continue to be so. So really, I'm just encouraging people not to stay silent and not to continue to be made to feel ashamed, because we shouldn't be. Let's relearn, let's reprogram, and let's support each other. Let's work within our communities for change, as well as holding the powers that be to account.
Even with this show, I must say that it shows our resilience. With all of the technical issues that we have had, it really showed our resilience to being able to continue. And to you, Councillor Cleo, I want to say thank you very much for standing with us, for sticking with us even throughout the issues that we had.
Very welcome.
Moving on to Sonja, your closing thoughts and remarks.
I just want to say once, just echoing what Councillor Cleo just said, that thank you very much for having me. And I mean, people know me that I'm the eternal optimist. I think these are exciting times in our lifetime. These are exciting times on many different levels. The many issues that are being raised, particularly those surrounding race, those what we had hidden in the closet for so very long, especially in this country, Trinidad and Tobago, which are now rearing their heads, which is very important for us, as I said, to start our process of learning and gaining that knowledge and making sure it's balanced there, because there's good and bad out there. So it's not all knowledge and learning are created equal. Yeah, but also realizing that each one of us has a responsibility to do better. Each one of us has a responsibility to make sure that justice is preserved. Though I'm in chess, I also play a little tennis. And I saw this quote from Arthur Ashe in his days, of course, as a former Wimbledon player. And we all know how difficult that would have been, where he said to people to rally, he said, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. So once we remember that we each are to be held accountable, each of us individually are to be held accountable for our own actions as we respond to these issues of today. Once we realize that and take charge of it, this world will definitely be in a better place, not just for us, but for generations to come.
And Sonja, I thank you very much for your input, and I wish that in 2020 you can be awarded again with the First Citizens Prize. We know that you are working hard on the ground in pushing the sport of chess, but also as regards to using sport, just as this topic says, to address social justice, and continue to do your work. And we wish God's richest blessings to you. Shabaka, on to you, sir.
Right. I hope you can hear me here, Jeffrey.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So let me just say that right now, where that struggle is globally, people are showing they have the courage to confront their past, the capacity to understand it, and the will and moral character to choose a better future. Let us not be left out here in Trinidad and Tobago, brothers and sisters. Let us take down that monument to genocide in Port of Spain. Let us review critically the people and values that we honor in our public spaces. And let us rescue our heroes from the dustbin of history so that they can inspire another generation to do better. Thank you very much.
I want to say thank you very much. We'd like to say thank you to our panel, Councillor Cleo, Mrs. Sonja Johnson, and Mr. Shabaka Kambon, for the insightful perspective on this powerful but yet uncomfortable topic for many persons in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean region. This team was a very potent team. This is my Liverpool team, and I want to say thank you very much for them for winning the championship with us. I know that, Councillor, you are Bristol, but this is my Liverpool team for winning the championship with us. Please remind that you can get a recap of our show on our Futsal868 Facebook page, as well as our YouTube channel. I want to say thank you and God's richest blessings to you and yours. But before we go, as always, we want to give you our statement. That is the Futsal Association of Trinidad and Tobago statement on racism. Take a quick look.